Good morning here in Los Angeles. Good afternoon, good evening, good day, wherever you are in the world today. My name is Herb, and I'm an alcoholic. Welcome to our gathering. That's the best term for us today. We don't need to make it a formal term. I think I call it a workshop or path to freedom or spirituality series, or I have a lot of names for a lot of activities and events. I like gathering. We were talking earlier before we started. It's almost like family. I feel so comfortable coming on and talking to you. Many of you are regulars and some of you are new. So we're here to talk about step 10. We're here to talk about emotional sobriety. I see step 10 as the primary tool of emotional sobriety. That's who I am, of course, and that's my email. I really recommend that you go to the website. It's been completely revised and upgraded. I've got one of those wonderful support people that has a real artistic bent, is very competent in web design, and is very dedicated to his own 12-step program and to the support of other people finding theirs. So you might want to go there because there's so many resources. They're free, downloadable. At the same time, because of Zoom and the pandemic, opportunity for doing more work internationally, I've recorded and or re-recorded most of the work I've done in the last 30 years, and it's on YouTube. I have a complete YouTube channel with a variety of playlists for a variety of subjects connected to the 12 steps directly and indirectly to many aspects of spirituality. So there's a little taste for everybody, I believe. Here you are giving up some part of your Saturday, taking time and paying some registration fee here, that donation to the retreat center. Why? Why are you here? It's not a trick question. It's not a silly or throwaway question. I hope it's a soul penetrating question to sort of set the tone, not sort of, to set the tone for today's hour and a half, certainly, 2.5 hours, probably, because that's the way it's evolved. My original intention was to set up a Path to Freedom series, which would share with those who showed up my knowledge and my experience with each of the steps. January 1st step, February 2nd step, March 3rd step. You kind of get the rhythm of it. Of course, I broke it up to make it sensible, with the 4th step taking up a little bit more time and 5, 6, and 7 taking up a little less time. But here we are talking about step 10 and emotional sobriety. You may or may not have been part of the series going from January till now. It doesn't matter. It's all modular. You can come in at any point and have the benefit from it. But ask yourself today, just today, why are you here? No, that's a real question. I'm asking you to ask yourself. And write a little word that represents the reason, or a phrase, or a full sentence or paragraph. Yeah, write it down. There's a benefit to asking the question of yourself and thinking about it in your head and in your heart, maybe even in your gut, connecting all the parts of awareness. But then writing it down makes it concrete in a way that No other method does. And you probably know that from some of the other work that you've done in your 12-step program or in your spiritual effort or even in your personal human development effort. Writing it down does something in our psyche, not only to remember it, but to expand it. And then here's the next question. Are you here because your life is serial suffering? What a great phrase to represent life. The Buddhists talk about that. The Four Noble Truths. Life is suffering. That's the first truth. The second truth is suffering comes from attachment. The third noble truth is the antidote to attachment is detachment. Oh my God, it's so simple. That's why I really resonate with the Buddhist philosophy and teachings. They call it a way of life. Like Bill Wilson calls the 12 steps a way of life, the Buddhists call theirs a way of life. And the fourth noble truth is that detachment happens when you embrace the eightfold path. And then they have, I've never been able to memorize the list, but it's right thinking, right behavior, right intention, right work, many, many rights. They're talking about operating on principle. That's the heart of today. Bill says it in step 12, practice these principles in all our affairs, but it starts with understanding that we have principles that keep us in alignment with reality. And when we go contrary with our free will to the principles of life, we suffer. It's really that simple. Do you believe your life can change? It's actually a trick question in that sense, because you're here probably because you're in a 12-step program, because you have at least a hope. Most of you actually have an experience that your life has changed, and now you're looking for more. There's always more. Of course, as addicts, we've always looked for more. I'm embarrassed to tell you that prior to coming in the program, I'm sober since 1984, by the way, a story for a different day. My wife got sober at the same time. In fact, she led the way. She went into the hospital program as the result of being at the retreat center. Irish Catholic girl from Chicago. She went up to the retreat center because there were nuns up there, and she had a connection to the nuns in her heart. And she went to a woman's retreat, and in that, she discovered her own alcoholism and that there was a solution called Alcoholics Anonymous, but that she had to go into a hospital to get herself stabilized. What courage it was to leave me and 3 children for 30 days to go into a hospital program. Totally embarrassing and possibly dangerous for her own marriage and security, because at that time I was Genghis Khan, and she knew that I could use that against her. And we were having difficulties in our marriage, as you can quite imagine, 2 drinking alcoholics. They asked me, the hospital, to stop drinking to support her recovery. That was February 20th. I had had a drink that day. Maybe that's why they asked me to not drink while she was in the hospital program. And February 21st is my anniversary. Whether or not you heard all the implications of that, I'm going to make it very specific. I was willing to support her recovery by not drinking for 90 days. I haven't had a drink nor an inclination to drink since. I did not pray about it. I did not go to AA. I did not admit, quote, that I was an alcoholic, because I didn't even know that I had an alcohol problem, and it was removed. awesome. I still am awestruck by that experience. The consciousness that creates the problem cannot be the consciousness that solves the problem. The man who took me through the work of the steps in 1988, if you were paying attention, I said I got sober in 1984. I went to AA. After I got sober, I got a sponsor. He didn't know much about the steps or the big book. I didn't know that because I didn't know anything about recovery. 4 years later, I heard a man who obviously knew something that I didn't. And I shared with him my background. And he said, Herb, you have a lot of information. Look at my hands. You have a lot of information, but you have very little transformation. You have a lot of academic knowledge. I have an advanced education in psychology, philosophy, and theology, 3 different disciplines. I had studied human development and participated in all kinds of self-help programs. And now I'm 4 years in AA, going to step studies and book studies. I had a lot of information, a lot of academic knowledge, but it had never gone through my heart to my feet. I didn't have an experience with that information. I didn't have any change. He said, are you willing to have that set aside, that knowledge and that experience, so that you can have new information and new experience? Brilliant. I had never heard it before. It made total sense to me. And he introduced me to what I call the set aside prayer. Those of you who know me know that I recently changed it to include unmanageability, the second half of the first step. This is what we're talking about today in step 10 and emotional sobriety. We're talking about unmanageability. We're not talking about addiction, the first half of the first step. We're talking about unmanageability. I invite you to join me. You're all on mute. It's your choice. You don't obviously have to do anything. Certainly, you don't have to pray. I'm inviting you to pray and to pray out loud. You have lots of choices there. Prayer is not about the words, it's about the intention. My intention is to have an open mind and an open heart, to not have, I can't allow anything, to not have the information that I have and the experience that I have get in the way of you having new knowledge and new experience. God, please set aside everything I think I know about myself, my unmanageability, my spiritual path, and you, for an open mind and a new experience with myself, my unmanageability, my spiritual path, and especially you. Quite frankly, I have some exposure to a lot of Alcoholics Anonymous meetings in different states, in different cities, in different countries. I have a lot of exposure to 12-step programs in the various addictions, drug addiction, food addiction, gamblers, pornography, Al-Anon, codependence. The best kept secret in the rooms is an in-depth knowledge and experience with unmanageability. The best kept secret in the rooms is the application of steps 10, 11, and 12 as a way of life. What does it mean, not cured? What does it mean, daily reprieve? What does it mean, staying fit spiritually? These are the things that we're going to look at today. It's only 2 pages in the big book, pages 84 and 85. I'm going to unpack them. In some detail. Hopefully it will be helpful to you to understand this tool as the tool of emotional sobriety. But let's take a look at the 12-step perspective. I'm a big believer in context. I don't want to just jump into the 10th step, although many of you might wish that I would. But I like a context. The 10th step fits within a context of the 12th step. As I understand it, the first three, and have experienced it, the first three steps are about power. Step 1, I don't have effective power. Steps 2 and 3, there is, and I can have a relationship with effective power. It's really that simple. A process that through my workshops usually takes about 5 months. I go very slow, very deliberate. It's a process to have an experience, not just the knowledge of the big book. You could do that in a one day or a weekend workshop. But to have an experience with the brokenness of addiction and the implications of unmanageability. And then to do a deep dive into what does faith mean? What does hope mean? What does trust mean? What is relationship? Step 3, what does alignment mean? Alignment's not a word in the big book, but it's the word I use for step 3. And once we do that, a commitment to turn, we begin the process of turning from our self-centeredness that we saw in unmanageability to other-centeredness, which is our hope as the result of the 12th step, having had a spiritual awakening. If you don't know what a spiritual awakening is, read appendix 2 in the back of the book. It's a page and a half. Bill put the word spiritual awakening in the 12th step, replacing the words he had originally in the 1939 first edition, first printing. In the second printing, 1941, he deleted the term spiritual experience and put in spiritual awakening and put in appendix 2 in the back of the book to explain what they are, how they're the same, and how they're different. They're the same. They both mean a change, a radical change. They're different. A spiritual experience is a mountaintop, mystical, phenomenal. That's what Bill had. But most of us have that gradual spiritual awakening, like a dimmer switch, my favorite model for the spiritual journey. It goes on with a very light voltage, but as we take some action, have some experience, more energy, more light, more electricity, more power goes into the system, and the lights get brighter incrementally. And in steps 4 through 7, we begin to identify, analyze, and eliminate the clouds in us that block us from the sunlight of the Spirit. We establish a relationship with ourself, with our true self, not with the persona, the mask, the false self, the Hollywood storefront that most human beings have and they don't know that they have. I was 48 years old, 4 years sober when I did this work, and it was embarrassing to begin to know that I didn't know and that I saw that I couldn't see. With all that background that I gave you a Reader's Digest version of at the beginning. And then steps 8 and 9, building a relationship with others. By changing the things that were impairing my relationship, as well as repairing the damage because of those character defects that flourished in me in Technicolor. So my definition of spirituality is really simple. It's about a relationship with reality, which includes a relationship with power. I made a decision that it is so. I don't know it. I don't feel it. most of the time, but I made a decision and I act as if. And when I do, my life seems to work. But the real point of today is that we've begun our way of living. Bill says in page 84, we've entered the world of the spirit. Well, where the hell have we been? If just now we're entering the world of the spirit, we've been in the world of self. And the first 9 steps are for the deflation of the ego, the deflation of the false self at death. Dr. Thibault said, a psychiatrist that was an associate of Bill Wilson back in the day, both as a psychiatrist personal, but also as a psychiatrist consultant to Bill as he was structuring the 12 steps and the fellowship of recovery. He said Bill got it right. The first 9 steps are for the deflation of the ego at death. The first 9 steps are for the deflation of the ego at death. But the ego has an uncanny way of regenerating itself. Brilliant. The ego, deflated by the first 9 steps, that's the promise. Read those promises on pages 83 and 84. Promises that are manifest when you finish. Hello, not halfway through. It says you may begin to experience the promises, but my understanding and interpretation of the suggestions in the big book is that those promises are promises at the end of completing the 9th step. So we come from powerlessness. We become so brain dead to that word. Think no choice. I have no choice over the substance or the process when it's in me or when it's not in me. I'm not going to go in depth in step 1, but that's the experience that I had as I went through each of the components as expressed in the big book over a 10-year period. Please hear that. It wasn't because I went through the steps once with a step guide or sponsor and I got it. Nope, not me. I thaw out very slowly, very glacially slowly. It took me 10 years to have a full step 1 experience, at least by my standards today. I didn't know that at each moment that I was living the 12-step program and going through the steps 4 different times with 4 different people. I didn't know that there was more. I didn't know that I hadn't had a complete experience until I had a complete experience. That Einstein quote. And that final journey through the steps revealed to me my unmanageability. I have 10 out of 10. What does that mean? 1 out of 10, 5 out of 10 represents the percentage of people with addiction in the world. Whether it's substance addiction, 1 out of 10, or process addiction, 5 out of 10. And these are ballpark numbers. They're not scientific. It's not everybody has an addiction, but everybody, at least by my interpretation of Bill Wilson's intent in the big book, as he describes unmanageability, all human beings have unmanageability. You're here today to talk about, or to listen to, or to experience unmanageability. That's probably the reason that you're disturbed. In the 12 and 12 in step 10, Bill says it's a spiritual axiom. Whenever we're disturbed, there's something wrong with us. Don't you hate it? Oh, no, they haven't met my father. Oh, no, they haven't met my mother. Oh, no, they haven't met my wife. Oh, no, especially they haven't met my bosses. Well, that was my attitude in 1988, 4 years sober, going to book studies, going to step studies, having done the steps myself without any help. First, I didn't know what I was doing. And second, I didn't do it very effectively because I didn't change. My sponsor didn't know that he didn't know. He said, work the steps, Herb. I'll listen to your fifth step. That was it. The best he could do. I mean that sincerely. He was a great sponsor. I had him for 28 years because he was a sounding board of common sense. Uncommon common sense. And I needed that because I didn't have it. But he wasn't able to help me with the program of recovery. At 10 years of sobriety, I looked at page 52. That paragraph, that second paragraph in the book talks about bedevilments. To be controlled as if by devils was my dictionary definition. To be controlled like a puppet on strings. This is so relevant to step 10, please. It's a spiritual axiom. Whenever I'm disturbed, there's something wrong with me. Whenever I'm disturbed, there's something wrong with me. It's never circumstances and it's never people. Oh my God. I know that you're having some resistance to that, some challenge to that, some response to that in a negative way. If in fact you haven't been exposed to this information before. Once I did a fourth step, and more than once over that 10-year period, I began to see what I could not see before, that my beliefs were delusional and my motives were corrupt. And that I did not see me as I was, I see me as I wanted to be, and I wanted you to believe that I was. What a dance. It's a devil's dance. I am having trouble with personal relationships. 7 years sober, 20 years married, wanting a divorce. I can't control my emotional nature. Angry most of the time, depressed some of the time. I am a prey to misery and depression. Not so much. I have been given the gift of genetic positive thinking and attitude, probably from my mother, both biologically and from just her exposure in the culture of my home, a very positive woman, very upbeat woman. I can't make a living. I added that satisfies me because I'm a black hole. There's not enough of anything. I think I might have started out saying I was embarrassed with, before I came in the program, that I really wanted to have a license plate that was NVRENF. Yeah, you could write it down. NVRENF in capital letters. I was proud of that because I'm a corporate climber. I'm a human development, whatever, enthusiast. NVRENF. Never enough. Oh my God, what a symptom of my addiction. Not just my alcohol addiction, but my narcissistic addiction, personality corruption. I have a feeling of uselessness. I am full of fear. I am unhappy. I'm doing this work at 10 years of sobriety, having had 2 spiritual awakenings, and it's in Technicolor still. Despite the spiritual awakenings and the changes that were giving me a wonderful and full and rich and Technicolor life, but I still had this restless, irritable, and discontent, to quote from the doctor's opinion. I can't seem to be of real help to other people, nor did I really care. The Spirit in my meditation revealed to me, in fact, the depths of my depravity, my neurosis, my narcissism. When it said to me, when I was reviewing this in my meditation, it said, Herb, you don't really care about people. You want the reputation of helping people. You actually don't want to help them. Again, revealed to me at 10 years of sobriety. I hadn't seen it. I was in the bondage of self, and I didn't know that I didn't know, and I couldn't see that I couldn't see. And this set me up to ask this question. Is God necessary? You notice perhaps that this is a little clip from the Sistine Chapel. Michelangelo trying to give us an image of creation. The creator reaching down the hand on your right to humans, limp hand, I might observe, not too willing to get energized, but there's a space in between. That's the space of mystery. Grace is God's reaching down to us, or reaching out to us, or reaching into us. And the hand of a human being is our willingness, willing to be willing, at the very least, willing to be willing, remote and limp, but we're so beaten up that we want to stop the suffering. And that touch point is the mystery. I do not know how it works. I do know that it works. And I'm invited to make a decision about that power. Step 2. It's a faith decision. There's no certitude. There's no feeling. It's empty. It's thin. It's invisible. It's dark. Step 2 is very dark. Page 53. God is or God isn't. What is your choice? And I made the choice. God is. Then in step 3, I'm asked to make a decision for a relationship. It's not that clear in the big book on pages 62 and 63. But take a look at the model that Bill gives us, 5 different relationships, 3 on page 62, 2 more on page 63. He gives us models of a relationship. He doesn't use the term. Read between the lines. Understand what Bill's intent was. Step 3 is a decision for a relationship with that power that is deep down inside of us. He uses the metaphor sunlight of the spirit. God, it's brilliant, poetic, but mystical. Poetic, but mystical. Mystical meaning an insight into the world of the spirit that's authentic. Sunlight of the spirit. And the clouds in us block the sunlight from us because we're out of alignment with reality. That's the word I use. Again, Bill doesn't use the word relationship for step 3. Bill doesn't use the word alignment for step 3. I do because of my knowledge of it and my experience with it, my interpretation. I think it's so important a concept because it's so integral to the understanding of step 10 that I hadn't planned on this, but I'm brought to it right now with you. And that is, there is a flow in the universe. I don't care what you call it. There is a flow. What brings an acorn to become an oak tree? I don't know. But there's some force that allows a seed to become an apple tree to produce apples. I don't know what that life force is, but that's what we're talking about, that life force. When I was working with a young man in a treatment center, I was going through this with him, and that's where it came up to me. It was given to me as a gift of my willingness and wanting to help this young man. And he said, I don't want to hear about 12-step. I don't want to hear about sponsorship. I don't want to hear about meetings. I don't want to hear about God. I don't want to hear about spirituality. I go, we're going to be awfully silent. But I went quietly. I said, I really want to help this young man. This is his 8th treatment center. He's 24 years old. He's been 8 times inpatient. This is his 8th time. And he doesn't want to hear anything from my knowledge and experience. How can I help him? It was 30 seconds to a minute of silence. And I got it. Talk to him in terms of a model that doesn't have those words connected to it. And I said to Kevin, do you believe in a life force? I used this gesture. He said, oh yeah. I mean, like Star Wars, may the force be with you. Yeah, I get that. I said, Kevin, do you have free will? Well, yeah, I'm here on my own choice. I can leave anytime I want. I chose to drink. I chose to eat, to take drugs. I chose now because I don't want to do that lifestyle anymore. I'm free and I can leave anytime. I have free will. Well, I know I have him hooked by this time, because now he's into my world. He's into the vocabulary that will help him, I believe. I said, so here's the life force and here's your free will, and you're going against the life force. The whole purpose of the process of recovery is to turn your will to be in alignment with the flow of the life force. That was the very first time, it was about 10 years ago, that I dropped the word surrender for step 3. It's, first of all, the word surrender is not in the big book. No place in the big book is the word surrender in the first 164 pages. But it sounded good. I heard it in meetings. It sounded good. Step 3, white flag, surrender. No, surrender's wonderful for step 1. And I implode in the experience of no choice and powerlessness. I implode. I'm fully defeated. I give up. I surrender. Wonderful word for step 1. But listen to step 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care of God. That's a ferocious act of my will, my free will. I'm making a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. I'm not turning it over to God. I'm turning it over to the care of God. In step 2, I believe that there is a life force. In step 3, I see that I'm in contrast to the life force, and I need to turn to be in alignment with the flow of the life force. He got it. I'm assuming he got it. He was satisfied when he left the room, and the next week I'm talking to him, and I could tell something had changed. And I said, Kevin, so what's changed now? He said, I got tired of suffering. I heard what you said, and I really am tired. That's why I'm here. I'm tired of suffering. I said, well, then what? He said, I quit resisting based on this. I quit resisting. I said, then what? I was willing to listen to suggestions for action. And I said, then what? I began taking those actions, even though I didn't believe in them and I didn't feel good about doing them. I did them anyway because my life wasn't working on my choices. Those of you who have been with me have heard me repeat that differently, but the essence of it, I've done it 100 times since then, more, because it's the essence. This is step 10. When I'm disturbed, I'm out of alignment with reality. Reality is not personal. It just is what it is. Volcanoes erupt. Earthquakes move because tectonic plates in geology move. These are not acts of God. These are acts of nature. A deer goes to the lake to get a drink of water, good for the deer. A mountain lion comes up behind the deer and eats the deer, bad for the deer, good for the lion. This is nature. Human beings have free will. They can make choices that are not in our best interest. They can make choices that are not in our best interest. And in fact, mental illness is real. The explanation for genocide. God doesn't punish, God does not reward. God does not come, God does not go. God is not present, God is not absent. There's no change if there is this reality. Bill said it on page 53. God is or God isn't. God is everything or God is nothing. I'm not here to talk about step 2 or step 3 in any depth, but it's the building blocks for step 10. There is a life force. I have free will to go against the life force. Steps 4 through 9 identify all of the ways of self-centeredness that go against the life force. And the point of step 3 is to turn my will and my life over to the care of God, not to God. You've heard me talk about the GPS, the God positioning system. That's step 10. That's step 3. Step 3 is the decision and commitment to turn. But steps 4 through 9 is the process of turning. And step 10 is a recap of steps 1 through 9. Step 10 is a recap of steps 1 through 9. And you'll see that as we go through this. And so in steps 4 through 9, we're talking about instincts gone awry. That's the terms Bill uses in chapter 4 of the 12 and 12. It's a clear illustration. Later on, he was more educated in human psychology and development. In contrast to when he wrote the big book, he uses the terms resentment and fear and sex in the big book. But in the 12 and 12, he uses the term of instincts gone awry. Well, what are instincts? Basic instincts of biology and psychology: fight, flight, and freeze. This is a really basic understanding for step 10. These are biological instincts for survival. Our reaction in fight is anger. We have a limbic system, that second brain. The first brain is the brain stem. That generates the instincts, fight, flight, and freeze. The second brain is our limbic system that reacts to danger with anger, to danger with fear, to danger with hiding. Freeze, dishonesty, hiding, camouflage. What a great model it is. Bill was brilliant. Resentment, he calls the outcome of this reaction. Well, resentment is coming from the Latin word sentire, to feel. And when you put an re in front of it, it means to feel it again and again and again. In my workshops, I have people who are resenting something that happened 10 years ago or 40 years ago. I have 60 and 70-year-old men and women who are still resenting their father and mother, long dead, but they're possessed with this feeling that corrupts their emotions and their lives. Fear, anxiety, dishonesty, as revealed in the big book in sex. The feeling of shame. The word's not in the big book. The word's not in the 12 and 12 in the same way I'm using it. Resentment is the feeling that's held of anger. Fear and anxiety is the feeling that's held when we feel danger and we're frightened. We want to run. And shame is the feeling of hiding, camouflage. We don't feel capable. We don't feel enough, or we feel embarrassed because of some of the delusional constituents that we've determined that are our very nature. But these are all the false self. The 10th step is the tool that continues to dismantle this false self, this Hollywood storefront, to identify those clouds in me that block me from the sunlight in me. It's a great metaphor. Think of the power that we need that isn't us, that is available to us, that is deep down inside of us. Whatever that is that you've made a decision about in step 2 and in step 3 to have a relationship with it. Sunlight of the Spirit, fabulous image. And all of these instincts gone awry are the clouds in me that block the sunlight from me. It's a great image that helps me with step 10. We're all human, and we never transcend our humanity. Bill says it in step 10, pages 84, 85. He said, watch for resentment, fear, dishonesty, and selfishness when they crop up. He doesn't say if they crop up. He said when they crop up. Bill introduced a spiritual arch in step 2 on page 47, and he says that step he implies that step 1 is the foundation for this spiritual arch to walk to freedom. He says step 2 is the cornerstone. Step 3 is the keystone. And then he says, by the time we get to step 5, we walk through the arch. Well, he never talked about the building blocks. I'm assuming what he means because of his reference in step 5 on page 75 to the walking through the arch now that it's built, that he's talking about resentment as a building block. He's talking about fear as a building block, sex as a building block. I've added dishonesty and secrets because those are implied in both his material in step 4 and in step 5, shining the light into the darkness. But what's the point? Freedom is the point. Now, clearly, the steps were built for dealing with the alcohol addiction. It's been now generalized so that they are used for freedom from all addictions, the first half of the first step. I'm speculating that it's also freedom from unmanageability. I said that, freedom from unmanageability. That's what 10, 11, and 12 are. I believe that's what Bill means when he says not cured, daily reprieve. We use step 10 to identify those areas of disturbance and we correct it. We place ourselves back in the flow. And then we sit in meditation in step 11 in the morning for guidance, and at night to do meditation on inventory. In step 11, when we retire at night, inventory, a meditation, because we want to be free of the clouds in us that block us from the sunlight. And then in step 12, practicing principles. Some have not given much thought to principles. It's a critical thought. It's certainly key to understanding and applying step 10. I didn't know that I had principles. I didn't know that I should have some principles, both. When I did step 4 the first time in 1988, 4 years sober, I saw that I had some principles, which I transgressed. And in the sex inventory, that I didn't have some principles that I really should have had or wanted to have. Not should in the sense of an obligation from society or from my religion. Absolutely not. But from deep inside of me, I identified the values that I had, that I didn't know that I had, that I was violating, and therefore that was creating problems in my life. Principles, what are we talking about? Physics is the science of physical principles like gravity. It's immutable. On Earth, in the Earth's atmosphere, gravity is immutable. It doesn't change due to circumstances. It's not negotiable. The principle of honesty and simplicity and integrity and fidelity, whatever else you might think of as principles. Bill talks about practicing these principles in all our affairs. He's talking about the values that come out of each of the steps, those principles that guide us to be in alignment with reality, not with our perception of or feelings about or knowledge of reality, but truly reality as it is. And if we violate those principles, we will be disturbed. And if we go with the flow of those principles, we will be serene and in harmony. That's the whole point of step 10, is to get out of the bondage of addiction, to get out of the bondage of self. You can see in the cartoon, there's no wall, ceiling, floor. But I do have bondage as long as I'm holding on to the bars. I need to let go of the bars, and that's what Bill says we do when we enter the world of the spirit. the three parts that make us animals and human. Our mind and our will are the two things that make us human. But our body and our mind are the two things that make us addicts. When I put it in my body or take the action, I lose control. And my mind is defective in that it's subject to an obsession. But both I recover from when I get to step 10. Read step 10 in the big book. I may not get to actually looking at the material in the big book because I'm making my commentary on it, which will help you then explore it yourself. Bill doesn't use the term recovered in the step 10, but he does on the title page. Take a look at the title page of the big book. How thousands of men and women have recovered. Well, what does he mean by that? On pages 84 and 85, he says, we are placed in a position of neutrality. That's what he means. We are placed. Hear the grace. We are placed. It's not that we accomplish it by a formula of doing the steps and human development, self-help, boom, no. It's that we do all this work as a preparation, a predisposition to receive grace. And I don't know when it happens. I don't know how it happens. I do know that it happens. And Bill confirms that. Placed in a position of neutrality. Neutrality with regard to our addiction. That's the promise at the end of step 9. But then he promises again that we're not cured. What does that mean? That means we have a daily reprieve, he says, based on our application of our way of living. That's his phrase. Way of living is a formal phrase that means steps 10, 11, and 12, our way of living. Our way of recovery from our addiction are steps 1 through 9, the program of recovery, steps 1 through 9. Our way of living, our program for living, are steps 10, 11, and 12. Emotional sobriety. Sobriety, a sense of serenity and harmony. No excess. We are rocketed into a fourth dimension, he says. Rocketed into a fourth dimension. Stay with the metaphor. In step 1, you get on board the rocket. And then the rocket takes you to where it's going. Orbit around the light. Our relationship with the light, our relationship with others in helping. We're not cured. We have a daily reprieve based on a practice of step 10, emotional sobriety. Step 11, improved understanding, guidance from a power that's deep inside ourselves. And we improve our conscience at the top of the circle. In step 10, we're able to discern when we're out of alignment and disturbed. Our feelings tell us. Feelings are extremely important guides to consciousness. They are the thermostat that helps us self-regulate. When I'm disturbed, I can take an action if I'm aware that I'm disturbed. Step 11 helps us to improve our consciousness, and step 12 enlarges our effectiveness. Gives us compassion, living in the light, orbiting the light. In a rocket ship, orbiting the light, I'm still responsible for making adjustments. You've watched many of the programs on the astronauts. When they're in that rocket ship and they're orbiting, they're doing a lot of work. They're in the rocket, they're orbiting because of the rocket, but they're managing to adjust the rocket so that it stays in the orbit. That's step 10. Step 10 is our ability, our way of living to keep us in orbit. I mentioned the brain, that brain stem at the top of our spinal column for physical survival. Our limbic system that makes us animals. gives us this emotional reaction for survival. When we're addicts, our instincts at the brainstem level and our emotions at the limbic level, they are managing our lives. In contrast to when we're abstinent, sober, decoupled from our addiction, we manage our emotions and we manage our instincts by our cortex because we know better and we can do better. Listen to step 11, the end of step 11, praying for knowledge of God's will and the power to carry it out. Most of us know better. We just don't do better. Some of us didn't even know better. That was my experience. In some areas, I was clueless because I was entitled. That was part of the syndrome of the narcissist behavior. Emotional sobriety is managing our emotions with our ability to decide and take actions. Self-regulation. Do I have a sense of well-being? Here I am abstinent for a month or a year or 10. Do I have a sense of well-being? That's emotional sobriety. That's alignment with reality. That's living a spiritual life in the world of the spirit. In terms of relationship, I'm not talking about God or the spiritual language that is traditional. I'm talking about reality, living in reality. As reality is. Do I have a sense of contentment? A Russian philosopher said, all human beings are asleep, dreaming that they're awake. That's brilliant. All human beings are asleep, dreaming that they're awake. Now, Bill knew that intuitively. He might not have known that phrase or the philosopher, but he knew it intuitively. Listen to step 12, having had a spiritual awakening. Oh, yeah. If I'm having an awakening, it must mean I was asleep. It's totally my experience. That's why I was able to see it and understand it this way. I had beliefs that were delusional. They were the lenses through which I looked. And when I look through delusional lenses, they're distorted. And that creates emotions that are disturbed. It's perfect. Bill says in step 10, when I'm disturbed, there's something wrong with me. My disturbed come from my emotions that come from my distorted perception of reality. So as soon as I'm disturbed, that's an indicator, that's the temperature, that's the thermostat that tells me something's amiss. So I have to look at my beliefs. Well, how do I do that? Bill gives us a formula. I don't want to be controversial, but I do want to be clear. I'm a big book fundamentalist and literalist. And when I read the big book, I try to understand what it actually says, not what other people interpret it says. When I read the 12 and 12, I have the same attitude. What does it actually say? How does the 12 and 12 correspond to and line up with the big book? Big book written in 1939. Bill was 4 years sober, 5 years maybe. 12 and 12 written in 1953. Bill was close to 20 years sober. It's important, I believe, to understand and read both of them. The big book, because of the original instructions that were approved by group conscience. That's the way the big book was written. Bill wrote it, but it was approved by many of the people who were at least 6 months sober, wordsmith to a T. And then Bill wrote his commentary at about 20 years of sobriety. So he had a lot more information and a lot more consciousness and a lot more experience. Neither in the big book nor in the 12 and 12 does he say the 10th step is in writing. I don't have any problem with people who want to do a written 10th step, but it's not the primary use of the tool. The primary use of the tool is to wear it like you carry your phone, a tool for communication, as the phone is. The 10th step is a tool for emotional sobriety. When I'm disturbed, Bill says, watch for these things from the 4th step. Yes, it is a repeat of the 4th step, which is done in writing, and Bill is very clear. In the resentment inventory, he says we use paper and pen. In the fear inventory, he said we use paper and pen. In the sex inventory, he explicitly says we use paper and pen. In the 10th step, he makes no reference to writing. And the 12 and 12, thank God, written, as I said, 20 years of sobriety, confirms the use of the 10th step from my standpoint, because it uses the term spot check. Oh, when I'm disturbed in the 12 and 12, on the spot, I use the 10th step. And what do I do on the spot when I'm disturbed? If I'm aware that I'm disturbed, well, I take action. He has 4 recommended suggestions. I pray. Well, why would that be? Well, it's a repeat. The step 10 is a repeat of steps 1 through 9. I realize I'm powerless and therefore I pray. Oh, then I talk to somebody else. Well, why would I do that? Well, I'm human. I do steps 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 in terms of talking to somebody, like I do in the 5th step, determining my role, my responsibility, my character defect, realizing again I'm powerless. And then I make amends, steps 8 and 9. Because normally when I'm disturbed, I'm going to disturb you. Not all the time is there an amend to be made. And the final piece is the final turning from your self-centeredness to other-centeredness. But notice how he phrases it. Resolutely turn your thoughts to helping somebody else. Notice he doesn't say that we help anybody, because we're using this as a tool on the spot. I might be at a family meeting. I might be at work. I might be in my community. I might be in church. I might be someplace where it's not responsible of me to take time out to take any action to help somebody else. Very realistic. I resolutely turn my thoughts to helping somebody else. Now, if people want to do it at night, if people want to do it in writing, I have no problem with that, but that's not the use of the step 10 as it was intended. The intention of step 10, look at my hands, is to identify that I'm disturbed and to realize that I'm out of alignment and to take the actions that put me back in alignment through prayer and through talking and accountability to somebody else, and then to turn from my self-centered thinking that created this disturbance to thinking about helping somebody else. And Bill knew psychological positivism, that once I begin thinking about helping somebody else, inevitably I will help them. That will be translated into action at some point. This is not in the big book, what I'm about to show you, but for me, I like to see a conclusion to this process to see what the results are. If I have a resentment and I use this formula, the opposite of resentment from my standpoint is forgiveness. I looked up the word in a dictionary. It means to release. Look at my hand. Forgiveness is a decision to release them. Boy, that simple gesture really helped me understand the nature of forgiveness. And I realized that it begins with step 4 and it concludes with step 9, a process, not an event, a process to be understood too, because we're not condoning their actions and we're not forgetting their actions and we're not absolving them. We don't have those powers. We're releasing it. Listen to the prayer of St. Francis. Listen to the Lord's Prayer. The Lord's Prayer. To the extent that we release them from their debt, we are released from our debt. Listen to St. Francis. To the extent that we forgive them, we are forgiven. We are released. Forgiveness, a decision to release them. A process. Bill introduces us to that in step 4, in between column 3 and column 4 on page 66 and 67. He says there very boldly on page 66, we're as powerless over our resentment, our deep resentment, as we are over alcohol. That's huge. We're as powerless over our deep resentment as we are over alcohol, having no power at all. So we pray, and he gives us a prayer practice for the removal of deep resentment. That's, for me, the beginning of forgiveness that is completed in terms of the closure when we bring ourselves to some form of amends, direct or indirect. You can complete all your amends. You hear in the rooms that you'll never complete your amends. That's ignorant. I've completed my amends within a year of completing the step work. Every time. Whether it's direct or indirect or creative in terms of a prayer practice. Some people are dead and you can't find, or some people you can't find, and some people that you shouldn't find. How do you make amends? How do you complete the process? Through a creative spiritual practice of prayer. At least that's my conclusion, and I got free. What's the opposite of fear? Read page 68 in the big book, in the fear inventory. He said trust. Fear comes from self-reliance. The lack of fear comes from God reliance. We trust. My wife said, when I asked her, when would you trust me again? She said, trust is not given, Herb, it's earned. I said, how is it earned? She said, with consistent behavior. I made a decision that God is. After I did the steps and years later of a practice of meditation, when I look back over my shoulder, I see that my trust in that reality is warranted. I still don't know. I have no certitude. I have no feeling. I have no emotion about it. But I have evidence now. And you've heard me quote Richard Rohr. Faith is that decision that's made without any evidence. And once the decision is made and you take those actions, the evidence appears. When I look over my shoulder is the only time that I'm able to put the total picture together. The opposite of dishonesty, obviously, is honesty. What does that mean? Transparency, undefended. Transparency, my insides and my outsides match. I have integrity. I say what I'm going to do and I do what I say. Amazing operating on principles. Now, the opposite of selfishness I put down as love. It's a hackneyed word, meaning that it is so used, it's worn out. People love coffee, people love their dog, people love their partner, people love their children, people love their parents, people love money, people love, and it just gets so dissipated because it's so overused. What does it actually mean? I looked up the word many times in different contexts, and I'm constantly in pursuit of a good understanding and definition of what does love mean in the context of what we're talking about, human development, a relationship with myself, a relationship with a power other than myself, and a relationship with other people. That's how I express the spirituality. The best definition I found so far, and if you have any better ones, please email them to me. But the best definition I found is when I looked up the word altruism. Altruism. Look it up in your own dictionary. An action on the behalf of helping somebody else with no possible benefit for myself. Wow. An action to benefit somebody else with no possible benefit for myself. I believe that comes very close to unconditional love, with no conditions. I don't believe I'm capable, or any human being is capable of unconditional love, but it's a great vision, ideal, model to pursue, to approximate. I believe the only reality that can, in fact, have this quality of unconditional love is that which has no conditions, which is the reality that we call God. A symbol for that reality we do not understand and cannot comprehend, that is infinite, had no beginning and has no end. We can't even understand the words. We can mouth them, but because we're finite, we have a beginning, we have an end. We don't really understand it in any existential way. But we can make that decision and operate as if it's true. That's step 2. Changes my life. Step 3, made a decision to turn. That's an action step. As I said, a ferocious action of my will. There's no passivity to step 3. It's a commitment to steps 4 through 9, initially having that conversion experience, that transformation experience, that spiritual awakening, that change in the way we think and feel and behave. And it's done to us, not by us, but not without us. And we live in alignment with principles as we understand them. As I said, forgiveness is a process, a decision to release them, a decision to be released. I was reading my meditation. It's in my Way of Life document, a 3-page meditation on forgiveness. And I wrote it about 30 years ago when I finished this work, and I've added to it about 10 years ago when I reread Fred Luskin's book, Forgive for Good. He's a Stanford psychologist who wrote from a psychological standpoint the process of forgiveness. Fred Luskin, Luskin, Forgive for Good, the second best book I've ever read in my life. The first book being the big book, because it's so practical, the big book. It allowed me to have a spiritual awakening, which is what I'd been looking for in the monastery for those 7 years, in psychology for those 6 years, and in AA for those 5 years. And finally, I began to not just be a seeker, but a finder. Fred Luskin wrote this book from his doctoral dissertation 30 years ago at Stanford on forgiveness. And he crafted a book that we can read without those kinds of understanding or credentials for just the lay people like we are. A forgiving person has no past, but an unforgiving person has no future. Totally relevant to step 10. Step 10 is the tool that allows us to bring home the forgiveness process, to be able to get free from our unmanageability. It's a process. Of course, there's lots of moving parts to the big book. To the 12-step process. The key is sponsorship, I believe. Not that we use sponsorship in step 10, although I do. That's my primary go-to. But I also would talk to my wife. I would talk to my daughters. I would talk to my secretary at work if I was offending her. I would talk to my boss if I was offending anybody else. So you pick your accountability partners that are practical at the time on the spot check inventory. It's a process. for full integration, we get physically sober, do the first 9 steps, placed in a position of neutrality. Once we get into the world of the spirit, we continue with step 10 on a spot check basis. It may be daily, it may be hourly, especially in the beginning. I'm 32 years awake. I'm 37 years sober, but I'm 32 years awake. And regularly on a daily basis, I'm not using step 10. I don't get disturbed. I have a fairly tranquil life. I live in alignment because I sit in the morning in a 30-minute meditation to get guidance for the day. And I sit quietly at night for a couple minutes anyway to review to see that I'm still in alignment. I do a radar sweep. Look at my hand. I do a radar sweep in the evening to see if there's any blips on the screen. And I live by principles. I'm constantly asking myself, so what's the principle to solve this particular issue? I tell my sponsees, if you're disturbed, find the principle that is opposite of what's disturbing you. And always take the high road and always be generous. Oh, they hate it. Herb, do I always have to take the high road? Well, no, but you always have to pay the price of taking the low road because all actions have consequence. That's what we call karma, right? It gets mystical and mysterious, but karma's not. It's psychology. There are outcomes and results of actions. Every action has a result. The accumulated results is my life today. I have exactly the life I created. That's very confrontational. Each one of us sitting here today has exactly the life that you created. Oh, sure, you've been betrayed. Yes, you've been hurt. Yes, you've been abused. Yes, you've had lots of negative, even traumatic, even criminal environments and people and impact in your life. It's true, it's true, it's true. But your reactions to that at the time and now is what's creating your life. A lot of that damage is unfortunate. It's a great word. Unfortunate. It's not God's will. It's not God's not will. It's life manifesting and evolving. Do not take reality personally. It's not personal. Circumstances and people are just doing what circumstances and people do. It's our reaction to circumstances and people that shape our lives. As we integrate with physical, emotional, and spiritual sobriety, going from steps 1 through 9 to achieve physical sobriety, staying in step 10 to achieve emotional sobriety, practicing 11 and 12 to create spiritual sobriety, we integrate. And the good news is that we're orbiting light that's infinite. There's no end to the dimmer switch going up. There's no end to the light that's possible. It's exciting. It's an adventure. I'm speaking from personal experience. Every day the light gets brighter. I don't know that it's getting brighter today, but when I look on yesterday, I can see it got brighter yesterday. And so I have a hope, realistic hope, that it will get brighter today. But I also see it happening that there's a disintegration, that the lights and the dimmer switch go down a notch at a time. Unmanageability, allowing those bedevilments we saw at the beginning to corrupt our motives and to corrupt our beliefs and to corrupt our behavior. If we're out of touch with our feelings, somehow narcotizing them with the lack of sleep. 7.5 to 9 hours of sleep every night is a necessity for most people. You are not an exception. 7.5 to 9 hours consistent daily sleep. If you're not getting that, you're narcotizing yourself, and you will compensate in some unhealthy way. If you keep a resentment and don't talk about it, if you have a fear and you keep a secret, if you're misbehaving in terms of your sexual principles and ideals, whatever they are, on page 69 says we have no opinion on that. AA and the 12-step fellowship has no opinion on your behavior, but you do. You have. We don't care whether you're homosexual or heterosexual or celibate. We don't care whether you're monogamous or polygamous. It's none of our business. It is your business. What are your principles? If you're ill at ease, you're violating your principles. If you're holding a secret, you're violating your principles. I read in a psychologist, Erich Fromm, from the 60s the other day, a wonderful, confrontive passage. I'd never seen it before. You've heard about the drink is not the relapse, it's the evidence of the relapse that happened yesterday or a week ago or a month ago. The drink, the slip, is not the relapse. It's the evidence of a relapse. Brilliant. Erich Fromm upped it for me. He said the relapse is the evidence of a compromise of principles. Whoa. The first compromise of a principle is the beginning of the slippery slope, and the dimmer switch goes backwards. On its own, the ego regenerates itself, and the spiritual shield that we live behind when we enter the world of the spirit gets damaged, and the obsession finds its way through the vulnerability, and we're then back into our addiction, and we wonder how it happened. A compromise of principle. I love that because of its rigor. Much more rigorous than saying the drink is the evidence of a relapse that happened before. That's nice and it's a great picture. But when you say it's the first compromise of my principle, then I am really personally challenged to stay conscious of what my principles are and to stay in alignment with them. This is emotional sobriety. It's the turning that Bill mentions on page 14. Now I will look at the book. At the very top of the page, he says, simple but not easy, a price had to be paid. It meant the destruction of self-centeredness. That's the unmanageability that we're talking about. Not gentle, destruction. And Bill says we're powerless. Check out page 62, the end of the second paragraph. We're as powerless over our self-centeredness as we are over our addiction. Again, he says that. He doesn't say it often, but when he says it, it's powerful. We're as powerless over our self-centeredness as we are over our addiction having no power. And that's why he concludes on page 62, we need God's help, and he takes us into the balance of step 3. Simple but not easy. A price had to be paid. It means the destruction of self-centeredness. I must turn in all things to the Father of light who presides over us all. I must turn in all things to the Father of light. That sunlight of the Spirit I would substitute, who presides over us all. And on page 59, as he enters into the world of the steps, step 3, he says, half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. This is the warm-up to step 3. The turning point. Made a decision to turn. From what to what? From my self-centeredness to other-centeredness. Other with a capital O, step 11. Other with a small o, step 12. This is an organic process. The integration and the organic nature of this process is built specifically for us as human beings. The two things that make me human are that I have a mind that thinks and knows, and I have a will that makes decisions that are free. All of the even steps are knowledge steps. All of the odd steps are decision and action steps. It's an amazing analysis that tells me that this 12-step methodology is built specifically for the transformation of human beings. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked. That's a code for prayer. Anytime we're talking to the Spirit. It's not about the word. It's about the intention. Please keep that in mind. Of course, we translate prayer intentions into words that become prayers. Yes, but don't get lost in them. We become brain dead to the Lord's Prayer. We become brain dead to the St. Francis prayer. We become brain dead to the Serenity prayer. The Serenity prayer, which is the prayer of emotional sobriety. What can I influence? What can't I influence? I need wisdom. I need wisdom to navigate. I can't influence much. I can't certainly control anything, but I can't influence much outside of me. I can influence a little bit more inside of me, and I need to learn from my mistakes. Step 10 is learning from your mistakes. A chronic mistake maker, that's who we are. And a chronic correction, that's what step 10 is. We ask God's protection and care with complete abandon. That's a wonderful ideal. If you do that, you begin to turn from your addiction to abstinence, from your anger to forgiveness, from fear and anxiety to trust and tranquility, from inappropriate sexual behavior, your choice to be guided by the principles that you have. But if you transgress them, it will crush you. Read page 70 in the sex inventory. If you continue this mischief, this misbehavior, this contrariness to your own principles, not ours, yours, you will drink again. You will relapse again. Dishonesty, rigorous honesty. Bill says in page 58, he spends a couple paragraphs talking about honesty and rigorous honesty. Must be pretty important. What does it mean? My insides and my outsides match. And I know that when my feelings are in harmony or out of harmony. Secrets, guilt and shame, unhealthy self-esteem versus healthy self-worth, willfulness and willingness. Two of the words that I got from Gerald May's books, wonderful author on spirituality and addiction. Willfulness, my self-centeredness, willingness, my spiritual effort at being a more decent human person. It's all about my will and the proper use of my will. That's how he ends step 10 on page 85. He talks about the proper use of the mind is to have a vision of God's will. It's not my vision of God's will. It's my vision of what reality is. That's what we get in meditation. That's why I sit in the morning practice, asking for guidance. What's my invitation today? What am I being invited to today? To be as a person, developing my humanity, and to be as a person as part of a community to help. The use of my will is making a decision in step 2, is making a decision in step 3, a decision in step 2 that there is a power, a decision in step 3 that I can have a relationship with that power, and that power is deep inside of me, and that's the only place it exists. That power is deep inside of me. Some people call it my higher self. Dr. Berger calls it the best in me to manage the worst in me. I just love the gentleness of that. my will out of alignment or in alignment. That's the whole point of step 10, is to be in or out of alignment. So how do you be happy? It's a commitment to consciousness. I need to know better in order to do better. It doesn't mean that I will always do better. That's why step 11, as I mentioned earlier, ends with a prayer to know better as well as to have the power to do better. Many people talk about having a gratitude list. An interesting variation on that is to have a list that in the morning, especially if you have a predisposition toward negativity, this will help you grow into a positive thinker. Grow over time is to put on that list something that you're grateful for, just one thing. And the next day to add to the list just one thing. And the next day, just one thing. The only rule is that you don't ever duplicate what you put on the list. Well, you can see that that challenge is going to confront you in 60 to 90 to 120 days to be pretty creative about what you're grateful for. If you have an internal commitment not to duplicate the words. Well, oh my goodness, after 120 days, what am I? And you stretch and you stretch. And what you do is you're looking for the glass half full rather than half empty. Prayer, of course, daily. If you're not doing prayer and meditation on a daily basis, there are two implications, two or three. Either you don't believe in the power of prayer, you don't believe that there's a power other than yourself, you don't believe that you can have a relationship and have an effective relationship with that power, and or you don't believe that you need power. Oh man, those were four things. No, if you're not, your behavior tells you what you believe. Oh, this is so confrontational. Yes, I'm here to comfort the disturbed and to disturb the comfortable. I'm quoting somebody else by saying that, but it's a wonderful phrase. I want to help. The litmus test of your sincerity is your behavior. You can feel it, you can think it, but if you're not doing it, you don't believe a word you're thinking and feeling. If you're not doing it, you don't believe it. Meditation is the practice of improving consciousness for guidance. There's lots of reasons for meditation. Biological health, psychological balance, sociological relationships. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Those are just not step 11. Step 11 has only one purpose: to improve your conscious contact with the spirit. That's the only purpose, to improve your conscious contact. I repeat step 11 in the morning at the beginning of my sit. I say the set aside prayer, some form of it, and then I repeat the words from step 11 itself to remind me. I'm sitting here. I'm going to use this next 30 minutes to improve my conscious contact, to get guidance and to get power, so that I can be helpful sometime, some way, in some place today. Be helpful. I dropped the word service, as many of you know, several years ago, because I find it too sophisticated. It's too theoretical for me. The Spirit invited me to exchange the word help. How can I help? Loving kindness is the lens through which I want to look, and I do make an effort to look. Loving kindness on a daily basis. That's my guide rails. I slip off the path regularly, and I get back on the path through the step 10 accountability. Talk to somebody during the day if in fact you're disturbed, or when you're disturbed. Bill calls it our way of life. Step 10 is clearing that channel. The channel is us. The channel of life, of light, of grace, of God. Choose your words, of spirit, that channel. Clearing the channel, but then filling the channel in prayer and meditation. And allowing then that channel to seep out into the community around you, not just in the 12-step rooms or people, but to be a lantern in your life, to provide light on the path that other people can see the path and can navigate the path in the light of your experience, motivated perhaps even by the visible joy that you have in living your life, to incorporate some of these principles in their own lives. If you have questions now, and I'm going to stay on the line.
My reaction, this is kind of a review of what we've been doing in the current workshop, but I got to near the end and my reaction is, oh crap. I have written in capital letters, I have exactly the life I've created.
Oh, I know.
That has made, I can't tell you the impact that has made on me, and the change in my motivation by hearing that and by reacting the way I did. It was like knocked the feet right out from under me, knocked me flat. I am so thankful to you, Herb. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. And it was meant to be cold glass of water in the face. Not disrespectful.
No,
but as a confrontation that goes, like you just said, holy shit. You didn't quite say it that way.
Yes, I had a nice little cold glass of water too. Thank you. And I would like you, because all I captured while I was bringing myself back from the shock of the ice cubes in the glass of water, you said something so profound, and I paraphrased it, but I would love your exact words. The litmus test for, was it our intention is our behavior?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Well, then I captured it. That is just exquisite.
Well,
and there is no hiding. There is no place to hide from that sentence. Thank you, sir.
Well, I'll comment on it, because
Please.
You're right, exactly. It's a very simple litmus test. All right. My head will regularly delude me. I won't know that it shades the truth. And my heart and my feelings will regularly mislead me. But when I look at my feet, they always tell me the truth.
Exactly. I also have much information, and I'm working on transformation. And that one sentence, I'm going to put on a sticky on the wall, and where I can't help but walk past it every day several times.
Yeah.
Because that is the only question I need to ask myself. That just see that statement every day for a while, and take a look at my feet. And thank you very much. This was lovely.
Very sobering.
It is. You think you're doing great. You can, have all these epiphanies, but if your feet aren't moving in the right direction, what the hell? So thank you.
It's the true measure. It's the true measure.
And I'm not saying my life is toast. I just have some work to do. That's all.
Well, but isn't it wonderful, number one, that you're conscious of it, and number two,
totally.
you're smiling when you say that, because that's what you want to be, a better person.
Well, that's why I'm here. I want to keep growing, keep feeling better, make a better contribution in the world. So thank you very much for the facilitation. I appreciate you so much.
Right. Wonderful. Good. Thank you.
Could you please explain a little bit this term daily reprieve contingent?
Yeah.
Because I'm not English. My native language is not English, and my translation, this word reprieve, is it's a little bit strange to me.
Good. I'm so glad, because I didn't define it, but I did look it up. I recommend that everybody look up the word, because it's very powerful. Reprieve, stay of execution. stay of execution. Reprieve means that our spiritual malady is a cancer that will metastasize unless it's treated on a daily basis. We cannot be cured of it. We cannot excise or remove it from surgery. We need to have it modified and managed by our step 10, step 11, step 12. A daily reprieve. It's kind of like you hear people say, well, I've been to 8 meetings this week, so I've got a battery storage now. I can rely on that. No, that's not how it works.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, and it's such a great question because it's about a relationship with the spirit. So here's my image of that. Look at my hands, that you lean gently into the spirit. And the spirit then moves you forward gently. Gentle, gentle, gentle. No violence here. Lean into the dimmer switch, lean into the spirit, lean into the light, and be embraced by the light. That's a great phrase. Not mine, but I'm stealing it from other people as I do many things. All right?
Thank you very much.
Oh, great question. Thank you so much.
I got so much out of it. And I want to share that I heard something that I have never heard before. I've probably heard many things, but this one I've never, for sure, never heard. Your suggestion of the gratitude list.
Yes.
I've been, people have sponsored people's gratitude list. I've never heard it that way.
Yes.
And I have written gratitude lists, and often it's the same list. And it helps a little. And I have changed. My negative thinking has improved tremendously, but
Yes.
this is going to be great. I'm going to do that.
Oh, wonderful. It's the first time I've used it in this context. I used it originally because I did a lot of research in happiness, and it was one of the suggestions from the psychologists that were writing about their findings in their studies. And I thought, well, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And thank you. And the other one is what the first woman commented on, and I can't remember how you said, but our reality is of our own making or something. What, I forget how you said.
No, our reality is of our own making. It just has nothing to do with reality.
Right. What was the line you said? Because I wanted to say something about it. The one that that our lives are a reflection of our own. Oh, I can't remember how you put it, but it, she said it was a splash of cold water.
That our life is what we have created.
Right. Okay. So my life, well, I get, I get resentful sometimes. I get angry. I have feelings. I process them. I work the steps and I let go. I mean, I just want to share. Well, okay. Let me just say this. When my life is very, very rich.
Nice.
It really is. And there's a little bit of I have a little issue with how do I keep humility? I mean, I with what you just talked about.
Yes. Yes. Well, look at the word humility. What does it mean? The Latin origin of the word humility is humus, Humas, I believe, which means earth or dirt, common as, not unique, one of many, not special, not entitled, all right? Like the grains of sand on a beach, all right? So also another definition comes from Teresa of Avila, a 16th century mystic, and she said, humility is truth. So at the same time, humility is this commonality, one of many, humility is the truth. So you have a truth about your competency. And if somebody validates that, you don't have to say, oh, shucks, that's not me, that's God. Bullshit. All right. You have a particular talent which you've facilitated and worked on. And if you played the piano really well and you get a compliment, you say thank you. Or if you're an artist and you've done something, or if you're a mechanic and somebody says, wow, you're really good. Thank you. Yeah, it's true. It's the truth. I am really good at this. But you keep it in a perspective. Okay, go ahead, please.
But I've been lucky too. I mean, I've
That's why I use the word fortunate and unfortunate.
fortunate. I've been very fortunate, not of my own doing. Some of
Yeah.
the, I mean, I work really hard on spiritual growth and
Yep.
and trying to, you know, live in this way we try to live. I fail, but I try, and I do. But I've also been very, very fortunate, and it's not all perfect. There's lots of, but
Well,
that,
no.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's an interesting correlation between hard work and good luck. Right?
And I want to share one other thing, if I may, about the high road. When
Yeah.
you said again today, which one of my best friends in program told me the other day, we always take the high road and we're always generous.
Yeah.
And I have an example that it might help somebody else that happened this week, which is somebody just let go of her anger on me and my husband for 20 minutes, you know, spewing her anger, and stop, you know, we said, stop, so-and-so, stop. No, it was a business, it's in with the business thing. It's very messy. And she went overboard, and she didn't call us names, but she spewed.
Yeah.
And she called 3 days later and left me a message apologizing
Yeah.
for letting out her anger. And I really felt like calling her back and saying, yeah, that's fine, but who the heck do you think you are to do this, to do you should have more.
Well, you needed to teach her and punish her.
Exactly. But I also am in program. So I called my friend. I said, I really can't do that, right? She said, no, you have to, we accept an apology. The big book taught me, you guys taught me that we accept an apology.
Yeah.
And we don't answer back to the apology. And
Right.
so I called her, and she said, if you want to talk about it, we can talk about it. And my friend advised me so well. She said, you can accept her apology and compliment her on it and thank her for it, and say, you know, that was really thorough, and let's move on. And do you know, I wasn't 100% in on it, but after doing it, I felt freedom. I was light as a feather.
Watch this hand. Forgiveness is a decision to release them. That's freedom.
You know, really humbling and amazing stuff again. Can you remember in the 2 questions? Number 1, can you repeat the 3 sentences that I think you're referring to Eric Fromm on?
Oh,
you have that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not sure that I'm quoting him as much as I am paraphrasing the information he had. He said the personal disintegration begins with the first compromise of principles.
Yeah, indeed.
I mean, it startled me. It was so clear and so confrontational.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, I think that's hit us right on the head. And then additionally, with a lot of these issues, as you know, or may or may not know, you know, I subscribe to Christianity, and which has helped change my life around with my disturbances. I never realized I was so disturbed and wanted to disturb others. And I still want to do that about
share the wealth,
kind of the time. But you know, one thing Christianity has taught me in my walk with God is these are all issues of the heart. Can you elaborate on that in relation to emotional sobriety and different struggles? Because I try to keep them a little separate, but I have to incorporate them in.
Well, sort of. So you have to help me, because you're speaking a little bit in generalities. When you say, are they separate, or how do you integrate them? What are you talking about? What are the components that need to be separate or integrated? Behavior,
self-will.
Well, that's all of a piece and with different names. So self-will is my decision based on me as the center. I'm the center of the universe. No, I'm the center of my universe, but I fit into the universe. The disease is I'm the center of the universe. The recovery is I'm the center and responsible for my universe and to fit into the universe. And whether you're talking about 12-step, principles or Christian principles or Buddhist principles, quite frankly, underneath, they're all the same, because they're all talking about living a human life with integrity.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So does that relate to the heart?
Well, when you say heart, what do you mean?
Your soul. We are
Oh,
soul
well,
beings.
So I'm glad I asked, because when you say relate to the heart, I think of emotions. When I think of soul, I think of the person. This is the essence of who I am. We call soul. I mean, it's not a word I use easily or usually, but it is my personal belief that my spirit, my soul, is my true self.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there's two components of my spirit, my soul, my true self. There's two components. One function is my mind and one function is my will. And they work together. They're not parts of me. They're functions within me. They're functions of the true me. They're functions of my spirit. That's my mental image of it. It's not scientific.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
No incompatibility between true Christian principles. Look at the Sermon on the Mount, and the Buddhist principles of the Eight Noble Truths and the 12 Steps. There's no conflict, because they're all talking about the same thing.
Well, I found that when I really want to live a life of 100% integrity,
Yeah, there you go.
okay, I can push aside many, many things when I
Yeah.
break it all down. If somebody's trying to manipulate something in my life or business or at home, and then I have to bring the Al-Anon concepts in there at home.
Yeah.
And so this is, again, just great cutting edge stuff.
Well, that's
and I
why
really
I
appreciate
embraced it. It's so
the work
inclusive. Yeah, it's so inclusive.
Yeah.
Because once you get below the vocabulary, you get to the truth of the dynamic. And then we can all talk the same and experience the same language. That's exactly right. That's why it's such a gift to us.
How can I, in a sentence, and I know it's work and it's a daily reprieve, get away from trying to fix others to make my world better? Because I'm still disturbed in that.
Great question for your Al-Anon sponsor.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I have the same question in a different context. I'm very good at what I do in terms of explaining the steps. And when people get the steps and they work the steps, their lives change for the better. And I have a hard time having balance in my life, because this is the cure to cancer. How can I not do it 24/7?
Yeah, indeed.
And yet I will die if I try. So there's the balance. I think that's what you were talking about.
Well, yeah, I found a lot of balance in my life.
Balance is, yeah. And so my daughter just raised her eyebrow, she says, so what room in your life is there for God? Oh yeah, I don't have to do it all.
No, I don't. And I found when I let go and let God and I spend time in prayer,
Yeah.
by the end of the day or the next day, you'd be surprised what works out. You really would.
I would not be surprised.
Yeah, well, indeed, yeah.
But I am regularly surprised. Yes, it's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I'm a very strong proponent, and having experienced, like having pulled away from God, and having to run and catch up now to maintain my sobriety and embrace the abstinence, and that it really is that we have to, I mean, it's a miracle I didn't drink or whatever. But of the importance of continuing to explore and be open to the adventure of life and sobriety and
Right.
these relationships as they evolve, and seeing how I've carried that bag of unuseful tricks along with me to inflict them on other people.
Yeah.
And starting to have read that the book, which I think it should be mentioned again only because you said it's your second favorite book besides the big book
Right.
of the Fred Luskin, because I started reading it and I'm just like, oh my God.
It is.
Oh my God.
And it, yeah, once you've got familiarity with the steps and had some experience with it, then you read his, especially 4 through 9. Then you read
Mhm.
his book. He doesn't come from spirituality. He doesn't come from 12 step. He comes purely from human development and psychology. And he has a different vocabulary. But when you put it together with what we experience and know, it's like wonderfully reinforcing and deepening our experience, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. I would totally say that it's deepening our experience. And I think it would be a very valuable, and I think it should, like I said, it should be mentioned again that as a valuable resource to, follow up on your 5th step and a 9th step.
Yeah.
Because those covenants I made with myself as a child and as a young adult that weren't really functional
Right.
have still embedded themselves in my behavior as a grown woman and a mother and a wife,
Right.
and haven't served myself, God, or any of the relationships in my life.
No, they're unhealthy. Yep.
Totally. I was being nice to myself,
Yep.
well,
Yep.
not even nice, I'm just saying. And thank you.
You're welcome.
And I really appreciate reminders of getting enough sleep so I actually could be facing reality and be awake. It was interesting how it touched me and what happened before. Actually, this week, I had lost my sponsor, not from my end. My sponsor couldn't sponsor me anymore. And as you talked about the principles, I had some feelings and awakening from God that I needed to change sponsors, and I didn't. And I have a new sponsor now, and it's amazing. And I could see that some of my principles were not aligned. So if you can talk a little bit more, because you mentioned some of them and I didn't have a chance to write them down.
There's no list of principles that are official.
Right, there isn't. Yeah, we
You
developed
can
it.
look in my way of life document if you have that. And toward the end in the 12-step section, there is a list of principles that are current. I review them every year and make sure that I'm still in agreement with what I wrote last year. And this year I changed the step 10 principles based on my current understanding and experience. But take a look at that list of principles. That'll be quite a sufficient large list. There's 12, one for each step. And it has a definition, and it has a description, and it has some activities, and it has the virtue. There's a lot of information there that could be the source of a very fruitful meditation, I believe. And then figure out your own principles from your own inventory.
Thank you. And I have, yes. Yes. And then I have another question. I didn't quite understand, and I heard Carol talk about it. Actually, no, I didn't catch everything what you said. And she mentioned about not trusting our heart or our feelings. They do lie to us, and
Right.
Feelings are not facts. And I heard that too in several programs. Something about feet telling the truth. Could you elaborate on that some more?
Only that the feet are objective. How you behave is objective. If you're robbing bank,
behavior,
you're a
okay.
bank robber. If you're flirting in a party, you're unfaithful. I mean, your feet, your behavior tells you what you actually believe, even though it's in contrast to what you think and feel and know. But the feet will tell you your behavior. That's why it's so confrontational. A great litmus test of the truth. Does that help?
Yes.
Today, when you were talking about happiness, talking about how are we happy, and then you talked about it takes commitment and intention, and I still struggle with negative thinking, and I also struggle with impulsive behaviors, and like with my daily 10th step and my I still act out on both of those more often than I would like to. Let's just put it that way.
Sure.
And I had, I got 27 years of recovery in 12-step programs. So it's like, that's frustrating to me because I don't want to do that stuff. And so I was wondering if there's any advice you could give me, particularly to work on those two issues.
Sure.
I'm working the steps currently with my sponsor, and I've continuously worked them. Like I work them over and over with my sponsor.
No, that's not an answer to my question.
Okay.
Answer my question.
The last time I worked the full steps 1 through 12.
Yes, with the help of a sponsor or step guide.
Okay, I finished them. It was about a year ago. I finished the 12 steps.
That's recent.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I'm in the process of doing another step guide.
I'm not interested in your story. I'm interested in the answer to my questions. All right. So let's just limit it to the questions and the answers. So a year ago, you did the full steps 1 through 12 with somebody. Was that your sponsor or a step guide or what?
Yeah, my sponsor.
Wonderful. Good. Excellent. And when you did the 4th step, what were you using to guide you through the steps as a literature?
We usually use the big book when we do it together.
Right.
Sometimes we also read the 12 and 12.
No, that's my recommendation. Exactly. Use the big book as a textbook and the 12 and 12 as a complement to commentary. Wonderful. And in the 4th step, you finished your 4th step.
Correct.
So did you see, what did you see in there in your 4th and 5th step that were your 6-step list of character defects?
My main character defects always are the same. Usually arrogance is up there on the top.
All right, well, what's the source of your arrogance? What did you see in the 4th step as the source of your arrogance?
Usually it's like I think I know best, or I know better than someone else,
And is
or
that
my way's the right way, or whatever that comes out a lot.
wonderful? It looks like you've seen some wonderful truth there as a character defect. So what are you doing about that?
My main thing when that comes up is I pray and ask my higher power to restrain my pen and tongue.
Wonderful.
Because it comes out in all kinds of little ways, like emails and verbal things, you know. And if I just don't say it out loud or write it down, it always goes a lot better, right?
Right. Well, one of the perceptions that I had in the column 3, column 4 resentment inventory was the delusional nature of my beliefs and the corrupt nature of my motives, which startled me because I didn't know that until I saw that. And then that translated into my 6th step of character defects, so that I then prayed specifically for the removal on a daily basis, and on a daily basis would talk to my sponsor about that, or on a weekly basis or on a monthly basis, depending on the severity of the character defect. But that was the solution that, and you asked me what I recommend as a solution. Since you've done some wonderful work and you're very aware of it, it might be that if you had a little more intentional focus, that it might help. And that is to pray each day specifically for the removal of a specific character defect and the behavior that goes with it. And then periodically, whether that be daily, weekly, or monthly, talk to your sponsor about what you're praying for and what you're doing. Pray on a daily basis specifically, and then talk periodically with an accountability partner specifically about how you're behaving. My experience was that the behavior changed within a short period of time. The behavior changed. The inclination didn't go away for a couple of years, but it went away and it never returned. The distinction I'm making is to be specific in the prayer, to be accountable about the behavior, to pay attention to how the behavior changed and then how the inclination changes. There was an experience of a separation between the behavior over which I'm responsible and the inclination over which I have no power. Does that help?
Yeah, that definitely helps.
Yeah.
And then my other part about negative thinking, like this, how I see that come up in my life still is like, I'm like this morning I was at breakfast with my husband and you know, I sit there like, you know, about to start a conversation or talk about something. And I had like 3 or 4 thoughts and they were all like extremely negative in a row. Like I didn't say them out loud, but I'm like, I don't want to, you know, like I love that we are the life we have exactly the life we've created, right? And if I want to talk about positive, interesting things in a conversation, I have to start the conversation with positive, interesting things, right? But sometimes I have like this laundry list of 10 things I'm pissed off about that I could talk about with, you know, at breakfast, right? But I like have to say, no, I'm not going to talk about those things because that's a waste of my energy, right? But
that's emotional sobriety. But that's emotional sobriety is self-regulation. That's right.
Yeah. And so but I guess my frustration is that I still have to regulate myself so much in that I have to sit there and say, all those negative thoughts, they just get put on my shelf and I start with.
No. I think the better question would be is why do you have? What's the source of that negative reaction? Column 3, column 4 of a resentment inventory will dig down underneath that so that you can see what's the wellspring of where this is all coming from.
Yeah.
There's something about your beliefs and your expectations and your motives that's very, very dysfunctional.
Yeah, and it's for me, it's my expectations with like the world at large in our society. It's not like a particular person anymore.
Right. Yeah, it's just what it is. It's very dysfunctional, and I get to be functional and attempt to be the light in the darkness.
Yeah. So to get at that, just my dysfunctional thoughts, would you just suggest I look at those again and let go of my expectations or my...
The thing is that you can't look at the lenses through which you're looking and see the lenses.
Yeah.
That's the problem. That's why my column 3 and column 4 worksheets, if you're not familiar with them, you could go to my Way of Life document on my website, and it's embedded in the step 4 material, column 3 and column 4 resentment worksheets. You probably need some help in navigating them, somebody who has done it, but that allows us to look at the lenses through which we're looking so that we can see the distortion of our lenses. And without that, I couldn't see the truth.
So doing the worksheets will help me see the truth and what I'm pissed off about.
I would guarantee it, but not you may not be with your background, you may be able to do it. With your sponsor's help, you might be able to do it. But if they're not familiar with the worksheets, it would probably behoove you to be in touch with somebody who has in fact had the experience of the worksheets to help you sort of confirm and clarify whatever it is you do in the worksheets.
Okay.
You know, I struggled with that too. And so I want you to elaborate on this for me. Emotional sobriety versus negative thoughts. How do you have any take on the lies of the enemy that?
Well, when you say lies of the enemy, you have something in mind that I may not understand.
Satan. I'm talking about Satan.
I don't believe in Satan. So there you go. All right. Okay. So I don't believe in evil. All right. So I believe in free will and I believe in self-centeredness. All right. And let's just start there. So let's not get religious with us. Let's not get philosophical with us. All right. And I don't mean to dismiss what you believe. You believe anything you want, but let's talk in the terms of a 12-step vocabulary.
Okay.
So ask your question from that viewpoint.
Well, so let me rephrase that to obsession of the mind and a new pair of glasses.
Well, Obsession of the Mind, I love New Pair of Glasses, by the way. I think it's a fabulous book. Obsession of the Mind in the big book is dealt with pages 23 to 43, and especially in the stories of Jim the car salesman on page 35, and Fred the accountant, I think it's on page 40 or 41, something like that. And what he's talking about is the dysfunction of our mind that makes it vulnerable to be hijacked by the thought. It'll be different this time. An obsession is a special kind of thought. Our mind is a thinking machine, but obsession is a particular kind of thought that takes possession of us without our permission and without our consciousness, is my definition. Without our permission and without our consciousness, all right, it's coming from the unconscious, all right, because we're not spiritually fit. We have a spiritual shield when we have recovered, but that shield is vulnerable unless it's reinforced on a daily basis from 10, 11, and 12. If we have a resentment or a fear or a secret or a dishonesty that we don't deal with, that begins to erode the protective shield, spiritual shield, metaphorically speaking, and then the unhealthy thought is able to take possession of us, that obsession. And we are powerless to protect ourselves from the obsession. There's where we need a power that creates this spiritual shield. I hope that gives an image of what I'm trying to talk about. Does it?
It does. It does, because it comes from a what it would appear to me more of a psychological.
Well, I'm talking about human development without getting too fancy. That's right.
Yeah. And that's real. We've got to apply those tools to our life.
Yeah.
Outside of any spiritual stuff, we've got to apply those tools to our life to like the rocket ship, I think was an amazing analogy, is, when that thing's taken off and moving and shaking and they've got many tasks they're trying to perform just to have a successful mission. There you go.
Yeah.
I need to have a successful mission every day, sometimes every hour, especially at home.
and the mission is to be in orbit around the light. Darkness is just the absence of light. All right. So we don't have to demonize it. Light is the power that is that creative energy out of which the world has been generated. And that's what we need more of in our lives, is that light. That's why I love the metaphor that Bill uses, sunlight of the spirit.
Well, about a year and a half into AA, I became aware of Bill's letter on emotional sobriety.
Yes.
I had no knowledge of it until then.
Yep.
That's how I stumbled across you and Alan Berger
Yep.
doing some stuff on the internet. And that letter in and of itself hit the nail on the head
It does.
for me, because I said, wow, that was the biggest missing piece of my puzzle.
And that's why Alan and I do the work that we do, because we agree with you. And he said that it's the new frontier in 1958. It didn't quite catch hold until about 1998. And now Alan and I and other people are really fostering it, so that you'll see books on it. You'll see articles and workshops on emotional sobriety almost internationally.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah.
I'm going to invite you to pray the 7-step prayer. Listen to it. It's right from the big book. I believe it's page 76. But listen to the last phrase. That's why I use this prayer. I call it the healing prayer. At the end of my morning meditation. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. And it's a wonderful way to end our discussion on emotional sobriety, to be in alignment and or to realign with the flow of the life force and live in the orbit of the sunlight of the Spirit. Please join me. My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character that stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. That prayer comes at a point, I believe, in the process of establishing our relationship with ourself. The end of steps 4 through 7, establishing that relationship with ourself. Amen. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you whenever I see you the next time we gather to talk about this wonderful journey.